Les 61 graad 8, ons is besig met Pythagoras. Waarvoor gebruik ons Pythagoras? As ek vir jou vra vir AC, en AC is die lengte van 'n driehoek, en ekskuus tog, ek het die 90 grade hoekie hier vergeet, because it was a piece of paper, this has to be all 90-degree angles, so ek het die 90 vergeet, because if we don't have the 90, you can't use Pythagoras. As daar nie 90 staan nie, mag jy nie Pythagoras gebruik nie. So waarom gebruik ek Pythagoras? Want twee syde is gegee en ek wil die derde een uitwerk. When do I use Pythagoras? In a right angle triangle, if two sides are given, I can find the third one using Pythagoras. Dis waarvoor jy hom gebruik. Dan is daar die storie van optel of aftrek. Okay, so if I want the hypotenuse side, it's a plus sum. As dit nie die reghoekige sy is, die skuinhoekige sy. Die skuinsy wat teenoor die regte hoek sit nie, dan is dit 'n aftreksom. So the two things you must remember for Pythagoras is if I want the hypotenuse side, it's a plus sum. If I want not the hypotenuse side, one of the other two right angle sides, it's a minus sum. So die verskil is, as jy die skuinsy soek, is dit 'n plus som. As jy een van die ander twee sye die reghoeksye soek, is dit 'n minussom. So al hierdie somme as ek vir hypotenuse gaan 'n plussom wees. Ek soek die skuinsy gaan 'n plussom wees. So all three of these were basic straightforward Pythagoras. First thing, you must say that D is 90 because it was given. Because it was a piece of paper that the sum was about, omdat dit 'n boek uit jou bladsy uit jou boek uit is dit 90 grade. So if I want AC, I will get AC squared by saying AD squared plus DC squared. AC kwadraat is AD kwadraat plus DC kwadraat. Let's just say the theorem of Pythagoras again. Because you have to be able to, when I ask you, say, in a right angle triangle, the square on the hypotenuse side is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Say it with me. So in a right angle triangle, the square on the hypotenuse side is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. Afrikaans, in 'n reghoekige driehoek is die vierkant op die skuinsy gelyk aan die som van die vierkante op die ander twee sye. So, ons vervang dit. AD is 30, DC is 20, and I use my calculator to go and work out that answer. En dan weet ek mos nou, dis alles AC kwadraat, AC kwadraat, AC kwadraat. You can leave that away, but I don't prefer that for grade 8. To get the square away, you square root. Om die wortel kwadraat weg te kry met jou vierkantswortel. En dan kry jy dat AC is gelyk aan. Nou is daar 'n paar antwoorde met jou sakrekenaar. It's going to give you 10 root 13 if you say square root, because that's the simplest third form. 10 wortel 13 is die eenvoudigste wortelvorm. Dan kan jy dit ook in desimale gaan skryf, wat 36,06 is, and because it was centimeters, I'm going to write my answer in centimeters. Now, it depends on what the question in the paper said. If it said 2 decimals, this is what you answer. If it asked for the simplest third form, this is what you answer. As hulle gevra het vir 2 desimale, as hulle gevra het vir eenvoudigste wortelvorm, lees jou vraag. It's very important to answer what we ask you. You can't do this if we ask that. The same answer, but you have to adhere to what the question asks. Jy kan nie antwoord soos jy wil nie. Goed, dan moet die volgende enetjie weer 'n keer. Because y is 90 given, omdat het gegee was, dat ek met Pythagoras aangaan, en Pythagoras says what? That the square on the hypotenuse, xz square, will be equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides, xy squared plus yz squared. So in 'n reghoekige driehoek is die vierkant op die skynsy xz gelyk aan die som van die vierkante van xy en yz squares. Dan vervang ek dit in. So xz squared is equal to 3 squared plus 1 squared, which will be 9 plus 1. 1 square is not 2. 1 maal 1 is nie 2 nie. So xz squared is equal to 10. Wat doen ons dan om daai kwadraat weg te kry? What do we do to get rid of the square? U squared, root on both sides. Remember, it's still an equation. Alles wat jy in vergelykings geleer het, gaan nog steeds hier van toepassing wees. So as jy links vierkantswortel, moet jy regs vierkantswortel. As jy links quadreer, moet jy regs quadreer. What you do on the left, you do on the right. If you wanted to square left, you square right. If you have a square root on the left, you have a square root on the right. And that is the simplest third form answer is root 10. Your calculator doesn't make it simpler than that. That's simplest third form. And your answer for that, I wrote it down here by the side, is 3,16. Because it was in meters, my answer is in meters. Weer eens, hang af wat die vraag gevra het en jy het nie vir jou gesê nie. If they did ask you for decimals, that's your answer. If they asked you for simplest third form, it would have been just root 10. Laaste vraagie wat jy gehad het vir huiswerk. Weer 'n keer, skyn sy kwadraat, but you start off saying, this is my entrance ticket for Pythagoras because it was given. Nou gaan ek weer sê, in 'n reghoekige driehoek is die vierkant op die skynsy wat NP kwadraat is, die som van die vierkant op die ander twee sye. NP square, the hypotenuse side square, is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. MN, I'm sure this must be an N. MN and NP square. And the reason, Pythagoras. Wat sê? Vierkant op die skynsy is gelyk aan die som van die vierkant op die ander twee sye. The square on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. In jou gedagte moet jy elke keer daai dingetjies sien wat ons gaan teken het met die baie vierkantjies hier en die baie vierkantjies hier and the many squares over this side. You must, every time you hear Pythagoras, think about that thing. Let it stick into your mind so that you can always remember we added all the squares here and gave the squares on these two sides added together gives me that one. Nou gaan jy nooit vergeet waaroor eintlik gaan Pythagoras nie. Then you'll never want to tell me, oh, it's 4 plus 24 is 28. Because some kids do that. Onthou, dis nie tel dit net bymekaar nie, dis die twee sye se kwadraat. It's not just add the two sides, it's the square plus the square. So MP square is equal to 4 square plus 24 square, which gives me, I didn't write that down, 24 square gives me 576, let's make sure, which gives me 592. And if I want to get rid of the square again, square root. Wat jy doen aan die linkerkant, doen jy aan die regterkant. So MP is, nou daai ene gaan wees, ek het daar geskryf, 4 wortel 37. That is the simplest third form. Dis eenvoudigste wortelvorm wat jou sakrekenaar vir jou gee. En as jy dit in desimale gaan skryf, was dit 24,33 gewees. And remember your rounding off should be correct if you round off. En hierdie was ook in meters. The answer is in meters. So what is Pythagoras for? Pythagoras is for working out a side in a right angled triangle if two sides are given. Now for today's homework, you only had the hypotenuse. Vandag het jy vir net heel veel gesê, die skynsy gaan uitwerk. Maar elke keer as 'n sommetjie kom en daar's twee sye, moet jy kyk. As dit die skynsy is dit 'n plussom. If it's a hypotenuse side, it's a plus sign. But if it's not the hypotenuse side you're working out, as dit nie die skynsy is nie, dan is dit 'n aftreksom. Hierdie behoort nou jou laaste les te wees wat ek vir jou stuur per video, want jy behoort dan nou van môre af weer by die skool te wees. If all my calculations are right, this should be the last video lesson that we do, because you are having to come back to school from tomorrow. So I hope that you really learned from these videos, and remember that they are still available on OneDrive on YouTube, and you can get all these videos, and you can even have extra lessons if you look at them again and again, revisit them, replay them again. So onthou nou mense, jy het eintlik ekstra klas. Al hierdie 60 video's wat jy nou al gekry het, kan jy gebruik as ekstra klas om weer en weer na die goeters te gaan kyk. Onthou, wiskunde is ongelukkig nie 'n movie nie. Maths is not a movie. You can't just sit there and enjoy the show. You have to actually work. Onthou mense, jy moet hard werk om iewers met wiskunde te kom. Dit gaan nie net van self kom nie. So baie sterkte as jy nou terugkom skool toe. I hope that it's going to be a good time for you when you get back to school again.